Hi, good evening and welcome to Resistance TV. My name's Sian Bloor and I'll be hosting this with our co-host, Lizzie Fletcher from Unity News. The date is 20th of July 2022, it's 7 p.m. and we're live. So if you want to join us in the live chat, please do so and you can ask your questions live to our guests. So tonight we're going to be discussing the Forde report that was published today. I've spent all afternoon trying to read through it as quickly as I can, but it is a rather long report. So we're going to get reactions from Phil Bevin, who is a former Lotto officer. He worked alongside Jeremy Corbyn in the Lotto's office. And we're also hopefully going to be getting Marc Wadsworth and Chris Williamson later on, as said he will try and pop in. So can we bring in Lizzie and Phil, please? Hi, evening all. Hope you're well. Welcome, Phil. I'll just kick off the show really by asking you, have you managed to read the Forde report first of all, and what are your initial reactions to it?
I've not read it all the way through. I've read bits of it. It's my initial reaction to it, I guess, was a little bit sick. It was a little bit like a punch to the gut because it was some of the. Hang on a second, a bit of feedback, so I'll put my headphones in.
Okay, whilst you're sorting that out, I'll just go to Lizzie. Lizzie, what's your initial reaction to the Forde report?
Well, the thing is, you see, that we all knew what was happening. We knew the truth of the matter. In 2017, we began to realise the truth of the matter. By 2019, we had ample evidence for it being the truth. So why did it take 4 years almost to bring out this report? Why is everybody echoing? Somebody got another screen on somewhere.
I've only got the
Am
one
I
that
echoing now?
Yeah, you are, yeah.
Only very slightly my end, Lizzie. You can hardly notice.
Right, what do the audience think?
Have we got an echo? Can the audience tell us whether we've got an echo? Mark, Kevin, have we got an echo? Oh, Kevin said bad echo.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll try and sort that out. Let me see if I can plug my headphones in, see if they work. They weren't working earlier.
Yes, it's improved now, hasn't it, Kevin?
Yeah, it's like right. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
We can hear you.
Yeah.
There wasn't an echo at all with you. How about you, Phil?
Yeah, that's all fine as far as I'm concerned, so that's good.
Oh, okay. It was obviously my fault. I've got my headphones on now, so yeah, we're cool. Okay, so Phil, Lizzie's just given us her reaction to the Forde report. What's your initial reaction?
Yeah, it was. I felt a bit sick when I first saw it because a lot of this stuff I've been saying to people in private for a very long time. Even while I was in Lotto, I was kind of saying that this, because I started in 2018, summer 2018. So it's when the IHRA stuff really kicked off. And
what was your position in Lotto?
I was very, very, very junior. I was only like an admin assistant, and I made the tea for a bit and did a really bad job of making coffee. So I wasn't an important person. But one of my frustrations is that myself and a few others could see what was coming down the line. I honestly think that probably Jeremy could see it too, but there was quite a large operation to try and make sure that the IHRA definition was adopted, mainly because I think that. I don't know. There are various different factions on the left, which I wasn't really aware of now. But you've got people like the AWL that are relatively imperialist, and they have representation within Momentum and all sorts of stuff. But there's also the NEC at the end of the day just wouldn't back Jeremy's position, and so even though he kind of resisted a bit. It became a confidence issue, I think. At least this is my interpretation of it. I wasn't in any of the high-level meetings, but you'll probably be aware that at the end of the summer, I can't remember exactly when it was. There was a big NEC meeting about it, and Jeremy, up to that point, had been trying to make sure that the right to defend Palestinian rights was protected, and so he, initially it was trying to make sure that not all of the examples were adopted, because obviously one of those examples included criticism of Israel as potentially kind of anti-Semitic, and so eventually it came down to Jeremy reading out a statement about the need to defend the right to criticize Israel over Palestinian human rights abuses, and he couldn't get that through. He didn't push it to a vote because he didn't have the backing of the NEC. And I think in terms of, you guys have been talking about 2017, which is a bit before my time on this, because like I said, I started working in Lotto in 2018. But it was clear from that moment onwards that the ability to resist what then became quite an aggressive witch hunt, a smear campaign and a witch hunt, it just wasn't going to be possible, because if you haven't got, and this is supposed to be a left NEC, I think it was left, nominally left, but not really left. And again, you've got the divisions of the various different factions on the left of Labour. And in my interpretation, it's that Jeremy didn't actually have a majority for his personal kind of internationalism on the NEC. And that is really what scuppered it on this issue, is because if you haven't got a majority on the NEC, you've got the HQ and the compliance unit is accountable directly to the NEC, not to the leader of the Labour Party. And you've got an NEC that effectively decided to adopt the narrative of the right on the idea that there is a disproportionate and specific problem of anti-Semitism within Labour, which isn't true. But it was the left NEC, after the right really kind of threw it open as an issue. It was the left NEC that chose to adopt that narrative and to enforce that narrative in their disciplinary procedures. And then it went as far as you will be aware of some summary suspension for anyone even accused of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, so, yeah. I mean, my own case, I wasn't suspended whilst under investigation, and then I wasn't expelled or anything after it had concluded. It was absolutely fine. But I ended up leaving the Labour Party. I terminated my membership because I was personally, my data and my information was personally doxed by one of the Labour Party HQ senior GLU staff. So I didn't get expelled, I just left. But we're talking about these factions, and within the report I was having a look at some of these factions that they were talking about, because they do talk a lot about factionalism and that being the problem within the Labour Party. But the factions that they are holding up as a light to conclude their summary and what actions should be taken from the Forde report are the likes of Labour to Win, Labour Together, and the Jewish Labour Movement. Now, they were three factions that, in my opinion, I don't know if Liz, or you or Lizzie agree, were responsible for what happened. What's your opinion about that?
They created the situation, and sorry to interrupt you, Phil, if Sean was just going to go to you. But for me, the Jewish Labour Movement, the thing about the Jewish Labour Movement is that you don't have to be Jewish to join it. You don't have to be Labour to join it. So therefore, how many members of the Jewish Labour Movement are not Jewish and not Labour? Whereas the Jewish Voice for Labour is you have to be Jewish and you have to be Labour. So, and yet they don't get a mention in this report.
Absolutely.
Not one mention.
I think specifically with regards to the JLM, at least the report does criticise their so-called training. quite a bit, which I think is at least is good. But I don't think, I've got loads of problems with the report in terms of its framing. I actually also have some significant issues with the original leaked report as well in terms of its framing, which I'm sure we'll get onto in a bit. But yeah, I think with regards to JLM, the issue with JLM is that it is it's not particularly kind of open organisation in some senses, because yes, okay, you don't necessarily have to be Jewish to join. It is explicitly pro-Israel, and so if you're Jewish and you are a member of the Jewish labour movement, then it's an explicitly pro-Israel organisation. So it's all right for people who support Israel, but then you're getting into this demarcation of legitimate and illegitimate Jewish identity, which again, this is something that the JVL has talked about quite a lot and done so very eloquently and very well. So there's a problem. It's not only the kind of the issues that sort of the kind of constitutional issues with JLM, it's quite limited in terms of the Jewish perspectives that it represents in and of itself. So not including JVL as well as that is bad. It's
Absolutely.
Yeah, it claims to represent the Jewish people within Labour, yet it doesn't represent the Jewish people within itself.
Yeah. Can I just welcome Marc Wadsworth? Hi, Marc.
Yay.
Hello, Mark.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight. We're just virtually just talking about our initial reactions to the Forde report. I don't know if you've managed to read any of it yet, and just want to get your reaction to it, Marc. What are your initial thoughts?
It only dropped last night, so we haven't had all of us a chance to read 138 pages. But I've skim read it and read the introduction that sets out the case and the recommendations that run into 10 pages. I mean, that just shows you how busted these are recommendations about the Labour Party's disciplinary procedures. So that just demonstrates how busted the disciplinary procedures are. I mean, no right to appeal. The Star Chamber members of the Star Chamber will be blushing at how undemocratic, non-transparent, and frankly awful Labour's disciplinary procedures are. I was left hanging for almost 2 years, suspended. I would have served by April next year, 7 years. I mean, there are rapists and murderers that don't get banged up for as long as that. Yeah. And I don't stand any chance of getting back in with Starmer, because all it is that you're no longer an expelled member, but you have to apply to rejoin the Labour Party. And you have to have the support of your local Labour Party. I mean, my local Labour Party, I won't give you the name, it's in South London, and it has a right-wing Labour MP who's a hammer of the right. And he has an iron grip on the party. I mean, their formal position at the moment is to support me. But if that were to be revisited, I dread to think what iteration or adjudication I would come to. So it's manifestly unfair, the setup. It's awful that they choose black people to do their dirty work for them. First of all, Shami Chakrabarti, and now Martin Forde, although he did have a panel of people, including former General Secretary, advising him. And as a part of the Forde report, I agree with the initial view about the report that it bends over backwards so much to be two-sided that it almost cancels itself out. There was factionalism Well, we know there was factionalism in the Labour Party headquarters, with people who should have been serving the members actually working actively against us having an election victory and diverting funds under the
absolutely, and they seem to have adopted the tone that each side was as bad as each other. That's the tone I sort of got from the beginning of it. And we were also discussing, Mark, that there are some of the factions who have been able to get their information across to the Forde report in form of their own reports, like Labour to Win, Labour Together, the Jewish Labour Movement. No other faction has been mentioned. I know the JVL submitted a report to the Forde inquiry. It's not mentioned in the report.
No, I mean, I was told by someone very senior in the inquiry some months ago that it was going to be this sort of report that pleased neither side, and that it wouldn't take up individual cases like Chris's, mine, Ken Livingston, Jackie Walker's, Tony Greenstein, you know, the egregious, awful miscarriages of justice. It doesn't
It's not even in its remit to look into the 45 grand that's gone missing from the 135 that was diverted away from legitimate campaigns.
Absolutely. But, you know, there are some nuggets in there. For instance, it accepts that anti-Semitism was weaponized. I don't accept that it was weaponized by both sides. It was weaponized by Watson and the clique, the saboteurs in head office. That's who weaponized it, with the connivance, egged on by the right wing in the Parliamentary Labour Party. The Wes Streetings, the John Mann, the Ruth Smith, Margaret Hodge,
Leslie.
Yeah, John Mann, doorstepping Ken Livingston with a camera crew on hand.
These are the people that were working on behalf of the Conservative Party to destroy the Labour Party and its opportunity to get into government, which the workers of this country desperately need. And that there's a hierarchy in the Labour Party of whose cases get taken up. You know, if you're a Zionist, you're above anti-black racism, which is rife in the party. Islamophobia, which is rife in the party.
It does mention hierarchical racism in the report, Mark. I don't know if you got that far.
Absolutely. So there are some nuggets in there.
Yeah.
So it's accepting that there was factionalism and it didn't have a standard chance if you went to an NCC hearing, as I did, and I had it weighted against me with 2 out of 3 panelists led by Maggie Cosin, mentioned in Chris's excellent book. You know, she's a hammer of the right wing and a friend of Ruth Smith. She should never have been chairing that panel. And a former right-wing Labour councillor. That wasn't a hearing, that was a kangaroo court, where they'd already adjudicated and decided the outcome that I should be expelled because I was a part of Jeremy Corbyn's group of supporters. So I think there are things in the report that are useful to us as the left, same as there are in the Chakrabarti report. And I would conclude by saying all of the chief saboteurs, the Sam Matthews, the John Stolidays, you know, people who have been rewarded with fat jobs in trade unions. Old now. Emily, is it Emily Old now?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, they've all been rewarded. Yeah. They got big fat payoffs, 6-figure payoffs from the party.
And some of the staff did as well. Sam Matthews, who personally attacked me, he got allegedly, I should say, he got a 6-figure payout when Keir Starmer took over as leader.
You know, this is members' money, and the millions they've spent on pursuing and you know, persecuting us. Dan Hogan, who handled my case, all the people that were used by John Ware, who has no right to call himself a journalist, he's a propagandist, on the Discussion Panorama programme, and Paddy French being pursued as a result of that. So we have
John Mann.
That's right.
John Mann being rewarded.
We have to name these people, call them out, name and shame them, but also name our heroes. that have fought. People like Paddy French, Sivier. Is it Michael?
Mike Sivier.
Mm.
Mike Sivier, yeah.
You know, Chris Williamson, Jackie Walker, Ken Livingstone. You know, we've
Look at
suffered.
Ken Livingstone today telling us about, this afternoon, telling us about how he's lost everything. You know, he's got a mortgage in his late 70s that he can't possibly pay. He's falling into debt. Meanwhile, John Mann, the man who manipulated a camera crew to doorstep Ken Livingstone on something that was actually fact, matter of fact, that Ken Livingstone said, and to be rewarded by the Tories for that, and Ken Livingstone is destitute.
That's right. Pam Bromley. You know, Ken and Pam are still fighting that legal case.
Yeah, they are. Hopefully Chris will be on in a bit and he'll be able to tell us a little bit more about that.
But
Moving
is that we've got to call out those in our own land who let us down and threw us under a bus. And I'm sorry, Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell were two of them. They thought that if they threw enough red meat to the enemy, as a
they were warned. They were warned by Chris and many others, though, weren't they? That they were never going to accept that. They'll just want more and more and more.
You know, appeasement doesn't work, as we saw in the 30s with the Nazis. Capitulation, apology. What were we apologizing for?
Yeah, exactly. And what are people still defending themselves for?
Pardon?
People are still defending themselves. Look at Kate Lineker, who wasn't her campaign wasn't sabotaged until 2019, but it was utterly sabotaged. And then her career was sabotaged. Her life was sabotaged. So it's not just from 2017. It's not just from you and Ken Livingstone and Jackie Walker and Chris Williamson. It's still going on now. Look at Doina Cornell in Stroud. No. You know, the people are still in position and they're still manipulating the entire Labour Party. And anyone who thinks that the Labour Party stands a chance of making any change, look at our example. I'm banned from applying to the Labour Party for 5 years because I might have brought the Labour Party into disrepute. They didn't give me any evidence of me bringing the Labour Party into disrepute. They just said, we've decided that you might. So therefore, we're banning you for 5 years. So, you know, if they can do that to a journalist who was integral, I wasn't integral, but I was there. I was at every conference, doing all the work. For years, I was doing the work that made Independent Media Association what it is today. And, you know, to be just destroyed like that, I mean, my case is nothing compared to any of the ways that you, Mark, have suffered, that you, Sean, have suffered, that many of my friends and colleagues have suffered. And I just find it absolutely atrocious that we have let them get away with this. And I know Sean was saying earlier that she got angry when she first read the report. Did you get angry, Mark?
Angry is not the word. Incandescent with rage. But at least it has shone a light into those dark crevices where those creatures those creatures inhabited. And that can't be taken away, you know, and we must use whatever we have now from the Forde report to demand justice, that those people are never allowed anywhere near any Labour Party position, and trade unions should reject them as well.
Yeah. Because
they are saboteurs, they are traitors, and that was a part of the case against me when I actually repeated what Hopper, you know, the president of the Durham Miners' Gala, David Hopper had called them traitors, hadn't he?
Yeah.
Remember when he disinvited them from the gala?
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, that was used against me. You know, that I'm not allowed to call out people who actually hate the Labour Party in any socialist form. And
well, and this is it. You're not allowed to speak out about Israel's apartheid state. We discussed this. We voted on it at conference, and it was decided that Israel is apartheid. Yet that has disappeared. Absolutely disappeared. How can that even happen?
can I say that was able to go to the High Court, where I took the Jewish Chronicle there for a very serious libel against me, and won a big apology that's still carried on their website in big type, substantial damages, and they had to pay a lot of money in legal fees. Yeah. So a lot of people have seen that as a kind of vindication, because it was based on the Labour lie about me. Yeah. You know, Labour had facilitated that libel. They'd hung me out to dry. And it was open season on my reputation, on my name, which
same here, Mark. Same here. Absolutely. But they know that we don't have the money to take them to court. Well, I don't anyway. So they just win because they've got more money. I ain't got any money. So that's it.
Well, that was the reason why I had to give up the case against the party after 3 years. It cost me £30,000 of crowd-funded money from the public, from supporters. Well, I couldn't afford to put a naught on the end of that and lose my house and my livelihood like Ken. And that's what they do.
Yeah.
In fact, it's in Chris's book.
Yeah.
Where he says, I asked Jenny Formby, will you agree not to pursue costs against Marc Wadsworth? And he puts in the book, they never got back to him. Yeah. So are those people, were they supporting us? As they told me, Amy Jackson said, we're working behind the scenes to help you. Is that evidence of their help? So they were happy to have bankrupted me. So I had to give in the end.
But I think that was their modus operandi with everybody. They wanted to finish everybody. You know, they wanted to finish Chris. They wanted to finish Jeremy. They wanted to create so many lawsuits that people wouldn't be able to take them on. And we all know there's big funding behind the people who were doing this.
No, but I'm talking about the left. I'm talking about Jenny Formby.
Well, the left should.
Amy Jackson. I'm talking about people, Carrie Murphy, who was supposed to be on our side and had the power to pull the lever and say, we won't pursue costs against Marc Wadsworth. In fact, I think it's in Chris's book where John McDonnell says, I hope he sues us. I hope he sues the Labour Party because we won't oppose him. Well, that's not what they did in practice.
Yeah. No. Maybe we could ask Phil. Mark, Phil is a former Lotto staff member. So maybe Phil can throw a bit more light on this for us about the goings on during the leaked report, lawsuits, things like
also that. Be aware of what repercussions will come from this. Phil, have you had any repercussions already? But what will become of you because you're speaking out?
Repercussions. I'm not really worried about that. I don't really want to have in the long term. I think certainly my career in Labour Party politics is very much over and done with by my own kind of volition there. I'm not. I won't be upset if I don't get a job in the Labour Party or don't get selected as a candidate for the Labour Party in the future. Because I'm not going back. I can't shed any light certainly on the legal side of it or on the higher level discussions. But a very minor staff member. So what I can, I did do, so I can talk about things in general terms and sort of my understanding of the complaints process and how the Labour Party structures work then. I don't think they work the same way now under Starmer. At least that's my impression. And shed some light on why the complaints process operated as it did, although, it might be a bit boring, but it's technical. I think it is quite important actually to understand that and how it works. to actually understand what happened. If you're up for that, like I say, it's not necessarily it's not sexy stuff, but yeah, I mean, so you have the division between the leader's office and the headquarters under the general secretary, and the general secretary is responsible to the NEC. And I mentioned this a little bit before. So if the NEC decides a certain course of action, then that is what the headquarters on the compliance team, the complaints team, will pursue. Again, I'm not sure about your case, Mark, because it's a bit before my time. I started working in Lotto in 2018, and I know Jeremy. I'm gonna stand up for Jeremy a bit here, actually, because I think he gets a bit of a raw deal. Because he did, certainly with the IHRA thing, he did try to resist the adoption of that and all of the examples, and he was unsuccessful. And it became at a point where it was, if he resisted too hard, he might have himself been deposed. So you're looking at basically the left wing of the Labour Party at that point, because it was a left wing NEC, chose to adopt the right wing's framing of the situation and the right wing narrative and pursue it as if it was, fact and true. And so all of the complaints then were handled according to this ideology that there was a kind of a disproportionate number of anti-Semites in the Labour Party.
And did you know the true figures? Did you know that it was 0.02 or 0.03% of one?
Well, I knew when Jenny Formby represented it to the party, but yes, I mean, it's a strange thing. We did know that it was a very small number. But it wasn't.
Did you? Sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted the answer to this question, if you've got it. And did you know that the majority of the complaints about anti-Semitism, complaining about individual members, what came from just one person, and of the number of people that did make complaints, a large percentage of them were not members of the Labour Party?
Personally, I didn't know that at the time, but I did spend a small amount of time helping get through the email backlog in the compliance unit in the complaints team. So from that, I saw the complaints coming in. I wasn't involved in any decision making or anything like that, but I saw the complaints coming in. I saw the kinds of complaints that were in the inbox, and from that anecdotal kind of side of things, it was evident, self-evident, that the majority of cases were from a very, to my mind then, a very small, coming in from a very small group of individuals who were flagging these. And part of the process, which I thought was ridiculous at the time, and they did amend it as it went forward, but I still think it's ridiculous, was that there was no form on the website. There was no way of the complainant specifying whether this person was a Labour member. So we, in order to see if it was something that could be dealt with by the party, had to trawl through social media history, seeking to corroborate the accusation. And so there was already, and we're not making decisions, we were just flagging the cases up to that sort of the higher up officers who would pursue it further. But there was already kind of an incentive to look for potential problems, because we were trying to see where the complainant was coming from. And also,
rather than a person being innocent until proved guilty,
exactly,
that you were told they were guilty and you had to look for the evidence to prove that.
Yeah, well, we weren't told that they were guilty, but we had to look we had to go out of our way to find the evidence ourselves, which often the evidence actually wasn't provided by the complaint, and so I think there was a bias in the process at that point in time. And I think the other thing is the issue was, and this really skewed things, was the sheer volume of the complaints, from a majority of which from a very few individuals, which really hamstrung the process. and it did mean, and this is the thing that really, I said it was like a punch in the gut, and it was a punch in the gut because I was saying this at the time, and I want to get this point in, is the point about the hierarchy of racism.
Yeah.
Which is, I said, because when I saw this, I actually flagged this, and I said, look, with all this focus on anti-Semitism, there's a real risk, and I said, I'm quite polite generally, so I said there's a real risk that we are actually going to be not dealing with other forms of racism equally. It's going to be, and that is racist. It's racist. The other point, the extension of this point I would make is, it's not just that there was a hierarchy of racism, and I think Mark has touched on this a minute ago. It's not just that there was a hierarchy of racism in the process. It's that there was a bias as well against certain kinds of Jewish people with certain kinds of beliefs. So, if somebody had said something that was anti-Zionist, again, like I said, the process was such that you'd then be looking, according to the IHRA definition, you'd then be looking for evidence that could construe that as anti-Semitic, because that's actually what the IHRA definition says. It says that it can be anti-Semitic to describe the state of Israel as a racist endeavor. So if you're following that guidance, you are already looking at critics of Israel as potentially people with anti-Semitic views. And this is, again, I'm going on a bit, but this is, I guess, why I'm speaking out now. And I have, out of respect for people, I have kept quiet, but I'm speaking out now because of the Forde report, but also the point that I want to emphasize, and another point that I made internally, is that because the framing of the situation from the labour right, from organisations like JLM, was that certain kinds of Jewish sort of opinion were more acceptable than others. I was saying that actually it's starting to look as if there is a problem of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, but it's a problem that's being driven by the right.
Yes.
Against
Comrades,
certain.
I'm sorry to interject, but I've got to go.
Oh, okay.
Well, let's hear your closing comments then, Mark. What would you like to say?
Chris was just about to join us then as
I've
well.
got someone waiting for me, and this was quite impromptu, and that was an appointment made some time ago, and so I'm being a bit rude in.
That's okay. Have you got anything you'd like to say
Well,
before
just
you
to
go,
thank
Mark?
you, comrades, for providing me with this platform to talk about something that's been very painful for the last, coming up to 7 years.
Yeah.
It's dictated my life. It's affected my family. It's affected my friends and people who care about me. Yeah. But I've been buoyed up by the huge amount of support around the country. I can't go anywhere without being stopped in the street and someone saying, "You're Marc Wadsworth, aren't you? You're the guy that was done in by the Labour Party." I'm really sorry that this has happened. I've been in the party for 50 or 60 years, and it's not in my name. And this is not sort of lefties like us. It's just average Labour Party members that are just appalled at the egregious way that a party that's supposed to be for social justice, it's supposed to be for equality and human rights, has acted in this way. And I just say that we've got to continue to relentlessly fight back. And in the end, we will be vindicated by history. And I think it's fantastic that Chris has got a book out that's put there, The Political Lynching of Marc Wadsworth. Asa Winstanley has got a book coming out. There's going to be an Al Jazeera program towards the end of the year that's being made. Journalism is the first draft of history. And I was let down by fellow journalists who weren't acting as journalists. They were working as propagandists. Yeah. And they took the spin and they didn't question it. And I think that they are going to end up being shamed that they were so cowardly that they didn't stand up to the so-called orthodoxy that Labour had an anti-Semitism problem, and I was a part of it. And so thank you for this platform, and we've got to keep on going, and we will be vindicated by history.
Well, thank you once again, Mark, and we all
Yes.
love you very much. We send you lots of love and solidarity, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for
you.
taking the time to come to us and talk,
Pleasure.
Mark. Thank you. Oh, well, so Phil,
Chris is trying to join us apparently, so hopefully he will be on in a minute when he can get his camera sorted out.
Excellent. Yeah, just going back to the point I was making is that, you know, it was looking at it, I was starting to think maybe there is an issue with anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, and it's coming from the right because of the demarcation of acceptable and unacceptable Jewish opinion driven by organisations like JLM. And, you know, I fed this stuff back internally. But the problem really is that you had a left-wing, nominally left-wing NEC that accepted the framing of the right. And so from that point of view, there was very, you know, that will have skewed the decision-making process. It basically inevitably led to a witch hunt. So I think I just wanted to echo Mark's point from earlier that this isn't just a case of, it is the case of the right wing driving this, but it's a case of the complicity of certainly the liberal sort of momentum wing of the Labour left, which really dominated the NEC at that time, the sort of Landsmanite position. They are complicit in it, and they facilitated it by introducing processes that allowed the right's purge to be carried out, and they actually carried out that purge on their behalf in the end. And so it is. You had a left-wing NEC, or nominally left-wing NEC, presiding over a complaints process, which Forde himself has basically indicated was racist. And that was the thing that shocked me, because I had raised concerns at the time, and to read that from Martin Forde QC was you know, wow, you know, it's I don't know if it's vindication, because it's really depressing at the same time, if you know what I mean. Yeah,
I was trying to talk to somebody earlier about it, and I was saying, oh, it's lovely to talk to you, and actually it's not lovely at all. You should never have been put in that situation.
Yeah.
And we have Chris here now. Chris,
can you hear me?
Yeah,
we can, loud and clear. Welcome.
Thank you. My technology is still playing up, I'm afraid to say.
Oh, well, it's doing well
having
tonight.
to join you. I'm having to join you by telephone. And when I first went on, I was upside down, and so I had to put the phone away. And I can't hear you very well, so I'm having to really strain. In fact, it's boiling hot here, and I've had to turn my fan off so I can hear you. But I've been trying to keep up with the show as best I can, because I've been out and about. And I agree with a lot of the remarks they've been made. I mean, my initial reaction in terms of the report is it's a bit like the curate's egg. You know, it's good in parts. But what really annoyed me, I think, about it, and you may have already touched on this, is the false equivalence that Forde has given to the victims of the witch hunt and the saboteurs who were the perpetrators of it. And those saboteurs, of course, include the Zionist lobby. They include the right wing of the Labour Party, and many of them are one and the same thing, as it were. But one of the good things, I think, from the report is that it's confirmed, I think, that anti-Semitism was weaponized. But I think for me, what it kind of just reinforces is that, you know, that Jeremy took the issue too seriously. I mean, I think, I'm not sure if it was someone who said it earlier on the program or someone who said it elsewhere, or whether it's even in the report, but it suggested that, you know, that Jeremy, the leadership, did take anti-Semitism seriously. I mean, for me, I think they took it too seriously. I mean, they actually facilitated it. The truth is that it was an infinitesimally tiny issue in the Labour Party in reality. And you speak to many Jewish comrades who say that, some of whom have been in the Labour Party for upwards of 50 years, so they've never experienced anti-Semitism inside the Labour Party. And, a handful, I mean, Graham Bash is one such example. He joined the Labour Party in 1968, I think he said it was. And he said he encountered one case of anti-Semitism in his time, and that was in 1970, 52 years ago from today. So clearly it wasn't a major issue. And the points, I mean, all the statistics that were produced by Jenny Formby, demonstrated that it wasn't an issue. But, Jeremy, the soft left of the Labour Party, the Socialist Campaign Group, as I say, they facilitated the issue. And I think it was things like, and I think Mark did touch on this. I think I did catch Mark saying this about the Chakrabarti review. I didn't hear everything what he was saying about that, but in my opinion, I think that was a mistake setting up the Chakrabarti review, because that was pandering to the Zionist lobby, as it was, sending in Baroness Royale into the Oxford University Labour Club. And even she, as a Zionist, couldn't find any evidence of institutional anti-Semitism there. And a lot of people were badly smeared, and that could have had an impact. And whether it has, I don't know, or not, on their careers. But it was pretty grim stuff, actually. Although I don't think that was in Jeremy's gift. Actually, Phil might be able to correct me if I'm wrong on that. I think that was a National Executive Committee decision, and Jeremy, didn't have the numbers really to carry the NECC. Although I think one of the points that just perhaps in conclusion, before you come back in, Phil, maybe that I think I did catch Phil saying is that Jeremy was in a vulnerable position on the National Executive Committee because he didn't have the numbers, and there was a danger that he might have been deposed. And that might be true, but I think the mistake was in trying to capitulate, to appease those forces that were ranged against him. And I think what he would have been better doing, actually, would have been to appeal over the heads of the National Executive Committee, over the heads of the Parliamentary Labour Party, directly to the mass membership. He had the numbers there, and I think he could have carried the day, even if that meant establishing a new political party. But we never called their bluff. Just in the same way as when Jeremy was eventually himself suspended, as I predicted would happen, the support was not really forthcoming from the Socialist Campaign Group. Such as it was mealy-mouthed. Many of them didn't even sign that mealy-mouthed statement. The threats were empty from the likes of Len McCluskey. He said, well, he wasn't very happy about it, etc. Well, that's all very well. Talk is cheap. What they should have been doing, what the Socialist Campaign Group should have been doing, and what I've said at the time is they should have said, you either reinstate Jeremy or we're resigning en masse tomorrow. Yeah. Do that, or we're going. And we will sit as independents in the House, and we will mount a challenge to you, and we will appeal to the members. There's still a lot of people who support Jeremy and that policy agenda, which is more important than just supporting an individual. And what Len McCluskey should have been saying is, you either reinstate Jeremy Corbyn, or we will start the process of not just defund you, not just cut the funding, we will start the process of disaffiliation. Yeah. But there's nothing behind these, these strong words. There's no substance to it. And I think that was the real problem. But I think one of the things that I'd like Phil, if I may, Lizzie and Sean, ask Phil, unless she's already covered this. My understanding is, and again, I'm not sure if this is because I've only been able to skim read the report, but I think Phil might be able to help us on this. That there were characters inside the totally dysfunctional and partisan governance and legal unit, the disciplinary unit, that saw the Jewish voice for Labour as anti-Semitic. I mean, this is astonishing, And just as one little caveat, one little anecdote, should I say, the Socialist Campaign Group were very reluctant to meet with the JVL. I had to move heaven and earth to try and get a meeting between the Socialist Campaign Group and the JVL, at JVL's request. When they did eventually concede to a meeting, without boring with all the details of it, only 2 of them turned up to it. And it wasn't in our regular weekly routine meetings. It had to be a special meeting, which wasn't really an official Socialist Campaign Group meeting. But I don't know if Phil could maybe enlighten us, unless you've already covered this in the programme.
Don't think I have covered it, Chris. I mean, you made a lot of really, really interesting points there, and I just, if I can remember them, I want to come back to them, because with regards to Jeremy specifically, the complaints process was not within his remit, as I understand it. I don't know what discussions were
no, that's right.
Had higher up, but it was not something that he could control constitutionally. And if he did, even if he did want to get involved, he didn't have the numbers on the NEC to actually, because the NEC ultimately makes decisions on disciplinary action. He didn't have the numbers on that body to intervene successfully in individual cases. so he was stymied. Whether or not he could have, I think in terms of going over their heads to the membership, quite possibly. I mean, but you have to remember at this point in time, and again, this is one of the reasons why I still respect Jeremy and probably always will respect him, is that he took the responsibility of trying to get into government and change the country seriously. And that meant trying to make it work. And there are problems with that. And it caused a lot of, there's a lot of wreckage along the road. But he did, on certain things, I know for a fact that he did push back quietly and where it was in his power to do so. And we were told not to mention this at the time. I think I'm probably okay to mention it now. And my intentions are, in defence of Jeremy, is that you talk about Jewish Voice for Labour, Chris. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think David Rosenberg was a member. He's not a member of the Labour Party anymore, I don't think. But, we did touch upon the whole the JLM training stuff earlier. But what Jeremy did, and this was relatively late on, and I don't know the reasoning behind it. I don't know why he did it, but he organised for David Rosenberg to come and do a training session with staff on anti-Semitism. So yes, he took the issue very seriously because as a committed anti-racist, I do think the accusations got to him. And I think they knocked him. I think also the actions of certain formerly trusted friends and comrades also knocked him as well. And so you've got to bear that in mind. He's a human being, and these,
yes,
under intense pressure. But he did get a training session by members of Jewish Voice for Labour into Lotto, which we all attended, and it was very good. It was really, honestly, it was really good. And actually, the Forde report criticises some of the JLM training for not, giving enough time for reflection and discussion. Well, that was part of this training that David did. He also took us on a walk to Cable Street. It was brilliant. It was a lot of history and context, and he was talking through the various different strands of Jewish opinion in the UK as kind of a counteraction to this idea of the single monolithic Jewish point of view that's pro-Israel. And all this and pro-empire. So, I mean, there are things that he did quietly to push back. Whether or not he could have started a new party, he probably could, but I don't think any of the Socialist campaign group would have followed him into it. So,
well, that's the problem. I mean, I don't just blame Jeremy. I blame the Socialist campaign group. I mean, not just on this issue, but I constantly used to raise the fact at Socialist campaign group meetings that we needed to be putting pressure on Jeremy, on John McDonnell as well, from the left. I kept saying all the pressure is coming from the right. We have to create some pressure, create some space for them to occupy new ground. It shouldn't just be cheerleaders. They hadn't gone as far as they could have done in terms of a policy agenda. But as I say, I think the ship floundered on the whole anti-Semitism agenda, in my opinion, actually, and the response to it. And given that it was such a tiny issue, I mean, it's all very interesting getting David Rosenberg in. I'm not necessarily against that, but, having training on stuff, let's have it as a political consciousness raising session. Yeah, but I mean, again, that was pandering to the Zionist lobby. Well, I mean, and they're a bunch of racists, aren't they? Racist kind of sort of settler colonial, bloody, supremacists. And, we should be giving them no truck whatsoever. I mean, Jeremy, before he became leader, was very good about Zionism and so on and calling them out. You should know that you can never appease these people. Nothing he could have done would have been good enough for them.
Well, I agree with that. But on the subject of the training, just a point of clarification, members of the, certainly people high up in the compliance unit were invited to that training. So I made the point earlier that there was an issue with the compliance unit and their understanding of anti-Semitism. And I do wonder whether or not that this was his, because he's very gentle about these things. Yes, you can argue whether it was strong enough. This was his way of addressing that, flawed though it was, and limited though it was. But I mean, on the subject, actually, I want to correct you on the Socialist campaign group, Chris, because I disagree. I think, I don't think they were cheerleaders. I think they were largely silent, and in some circumstances, and I don't normally name names, but I'm fed up now, so I'm going to. John McDonnell was actually cheerleading from the other direction, and actually not only
fair comment.
The
Maybe I'm
socialist
giving them too
campaign
much credit, really. Yeah. No, that's a fair comment. To be fair, thinking about it. Yeah.
And can I add something that I because I used to interview Jeremy a lot. I used to interview you, Chris, a lot.
Yes.
And I've interviewed a lot of people, MPs and staff, and all sorts of people within the Labour Party. And I asked Jeremy why he wasn't defending or at least explaining the situation about Chris Williamson. And he said that I want to keep in position for as long as possible. So that's evidencing what you just said, Phil, that he strongly believed that if he could get into position as Prime Minister, then he could bring about some real change.
He wouldn't have been able to, Lizzie.
Well, of course.
That was a fool's errand, that was, if ever there was one.
We know that now.
But it wasn't just me making that point to Jeremy and the Socialist Campaign Group, and that's why I was so passionate about the democracy reforms. I made the point to Jeremy and to the campaign group that unless we get these democracy reforms through, the open selection reform through, this shower, I won't swear, of excrement will actually sabotage the programme. We won't be able to get it through. Well, you'll have the keys to number 10. You'll be in office, but not in power. But that would be far worse. I mean, look, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work that out. But I'm not some great political soothsayer. It's plain common sense. And, what's the point of having a political position? What's the point of having a platform? What's the point of being the leader if you're just going to be taken hostage and you can't, I want to stay in position for a bit longer? For what? Yeah. For what purpose?
Yeah, well,
and as I keep saying, and when I became an MP, that you have to use your, and indeed a councillor for that matter, you have to use your platform to try and make a difference, to do what's right. And if all you're going to do is just draw your salary, keep your head down and look forward to a nice pension, then, you're in the wrong, well, it depends how you look at it, really. Yeah, but that is not what it should be about. No, it should be about giving leadership.
It should, but I just wanted to add the next bit, that I interviewed another MP and I said, why are you just parroting the JLM narrative? Why aren't you talking about Jewish Voice for Labour, JVL? And he said, well, because JVL are not nice people. And he'd been told this. He was an MP, sitting MP, and he'd been told this by JLM, that they were representative of all Jewish people in the UK. So therefore, the other people who were nasty, the JVL, were not to be listened to. Don't listen to them because they're lying to you. So I said, so you're saying that they're the wrong kind of Jew? And he said, yes. So I said, so why don't you actually just listen in private to what they have to say? And he went away and he listened in private to what JVL had to say. And he came back to me and he said, oh my God, I can't believe what I've been believing all this time. And from that point on, he has been a coherent and current voice, voicing JVL as well. He might actually, he hasn't been voicing what JLM said at all for at least a year. But before that, he started voicing JVL instead. And he's completely turned around. But that's just one MP. And it's a very clever, intelligent, articulate MP who can think critically. So imagine all the other MPs who just believe that JLM is the voice of Jewish people in the UK.
They're the voice of Zionism.
Exactly. That's what's so scary.
I realised I forgot to respond to you, Chris. You mentioned my anecdote of a member of the complaints team regarding JVL as anti-Semitic.
Yes,
that's completely true. And I can't remember. I wouldn't name names anyway, but I can't remember who it was. But I do remember that this person was regarded as a left-wing member of the complaints team. And actually, I don't think that was an isolated point of view. I think it was fairly widely shared And bear in mind, this is the left, and these are the people who were implementing the decisions on disciplinary matters regarding anti-Semitism, and they regarded JVL as anti-Semitic.
Yeah,
oh my God, that is incredible.
Another thing of the Westminster bubble, isn't it? When you're in the Westminster bubble, you believe what's happening in your immediate periphery. You don't, you can't think about things outside of it. And it was only when I said to this MP, are you sure you're supporting the right Jewish movement here? Because in the JLM, you don't have to be Jewish. You don't even have to be in Labour. But the JVL, you have to be Jewish and you have to be in Labour. So are you sure you're not the one supporting the wrong kind of Jew?
Well, somebody's been making their own narrative there, haven't they? And recruiting people to that way of thinking. We're at the top of the hour. No, we've not got time. It's 3 minutes past 8. And to be fair, we haven't got many questions. There's maybe one, but we've got loads and loads of comments. I think this show has got people's backs up. They're riled up against the Labour Party about what's happened and what will continue to happen. So yeah, everybody in the chat has left a comment. Thank you very much for commenting. I have been reading them as we go along and totally agree with all the sentiments that you're putting through tonight. Just a quick final last word, Chris, from you and Phil before we close.
Well, let Phil go first.
Okay. I think I want to come on something that Chris said about the democracy reforms. My understanding is that the trade unions played a large part in torpedoing that. And so, I mean, the way I look at it, and this is from experience, I'm not an ideologue of any particular persuasion, but my experience within the Labour Party at all levels convinces me that it is not a viable, it's not a progressive party. It's not a viable organisation for progressive change. And the Labour left, such as it is deeply compromised and is never going to push forward what we need in this country. So please, for the love of God, forget about the Labour Party. Move on. It's dead.
Thanks,
Hallelujah. Here to that. I mean, that's all I'd say just in relation to the Forde report, which is the theme of tonight's programme, is that it has vindicated all of those people who called out the anti-Semitism smears, notwithstanding Forde's attempt to try and draw some false equivalence. But he has acknowledged, I think, that anti-Semitism was weaponized. And I think on that basis, many people, not just me, but many grassroots members and other, prominent members have suffered terribly, actually, as a result of these smears. Their reputations trashed. People like Ken Livingstone, who is struggling financially now as a result of this. And it's another illustration of the maximalist strategy of the Zionist lobby. It's not just a political strategy. They want to utterly crush people into the dirt. It's a sort of a Machiavellian approach, really, to utterly destroy your enemy in inverted commas. But I think people are catching on to what they're up to. I now present a weekly program called Palestine Declassified, where we expose the Zionist lobby. The Labour Party has been subject to state capture by the State of Israel. No doubt in my mind about that. Around half the members of the Parliamentary Labour Party are members of the Labour Friends of Israel. They regularly have all expenses paid trips to Israel. They essentially have control over the policy-making facility of the party, the disciplinary system in the Labour Party, and have an ex-Israeli spy, 8200 spy, heading up their social media operation. What more evidence do people need about the pernicious influence of a Zionist lobby? I mean, we had the Al Jazeera documentary, which kind of sort of laid it all out in 2017. Little to nothing was actually done about that, and it's actually got considerably worse since then. And obviously, somebody like Keir Starmer, who says he supports Zionism without qualification, they have somebody who's an absolute champion for the the Zionist cause. And so I agree with Phil, absolutely. The Labour Party is a busted flush. It's gone, and we need to move on and to try and build something different, build a movement, build an alternative political representation to the Labour Party, because we are not going to get anything that we all believe in, I think, in relation to fairness, justice, socialism, anti-imperialism. It's going to be just a continuation of the neoliberal status quo, the continuation of the imperialist foreign policy that we've seen for the last 100 years or more.
Yeah.
So I think the Forde report's given us
now,
something to build on, and let's use the the good bits of it and move forward.
And we need system change now. We need a complete system change.
And can we have a hashtag to end on? It was a scam.
It was a scam. It was a scam.
It was. We knew
really
it all
was.
along. Yeah. Don't forget to buy Chris's new book, 10 Years Hard Labour. You can find it on Amazon and other places. If you have a look on his Twitter, it'll be on there. It's also on our Facebook. You can find links to where you can buy it from.
Share this show with everybody, all your mates, even people you don't know. Share it with them.
Here it is.
I've already bought mine.
Have you got it signed though? We want it all signed.
Yeah,
it's signed. I'm sure I'll see Chris at some point, and then
you're going to have cramp, Chris.
Right, okay, we're going to draw this show to an end. Thank you everybody who's watched this evening. Thank you to our guest Phil, to Chris, to Lizzie, to Marc Wadsworth, and we'll see you all next week. Good night.
Bye everybody.
Bye.
It was a scam.